Joaquin Castro of Texas. He is a member of the House Foreign Affairs and Intelligence Committees.
Welcome, Congressman. It's a pleasure having you. So let's just unpack this assessment a little bit more, because there are a couple of storylines that are emerging here. But for you, as a member of Congress, sitting in a position on the Intelligence Committee to look at this information, how much will you be able to trust coming out of this administration when you finally, if ever, get that briefing that sort of lays out exactly what happened? Because we have quotes here from one of the three sources saying we were assuming that the damage was going to be much more significant than this assessment is finding. So clearly there is some distance between where the White House is on this and what the intelligence community is looking at post the bombing. What do you anticipate?
Yeah, well, first, let's consider the context and how we got here. We had an agreement with Iran to contain their nuclear weapons program. That agreement was put in place during President Obama's presidency. And when Donald Trump became president, he took us out of that agreement. And so at that point, it became harder to know how quickly they were enriching uranium and how close they were to developing a nuclear weapon. That said, all of the intelligence that I saw beforehand, the military, diplomatic, and intelligence assessments, didn't suggest that there was an imminent threat that Iran had a functional, deliverable nuclear weapon. Because it's not just about enriching uranium. There are several other steps that a country has to take to have that functional nuclear weapon. And so what we have now, after the United States got involved in the war, dropped all those bombs on the nuclear facilities, is we had Donald Trump essentially exaggerating and overstating, which is not unusual for him, but exaggerating the damage that was done. And I can't comment, because I'm on the Intelligence Committee, about a particular assessment, but it's my belief, after looking at everything, that the president lied about the amount of damage that was done. And so the danger now is, if in fact they still have the ability to develop a nuclear weapon within months, for example, then we could be in this situation again, where Israel strikes at Iran again and tries to get the United States to go along. That could be a few months, it could be within a year, but it would essentially mean that we're caught in this endless loop of a warring Iran and Israel, and the United States being asked to get involved.
Not asking you to comment on the contents of the assessment, but the classified assessment in question, sir. We now have Senate Democrats who have told NBC News that they have seen the document, who are on the relevant committees. Have you seen this document in question?
I've seen an assessment of what happened. I'll just say that.
All right. You want to pick up, Simone? Do you have a follow-up there? I'm sure you have many.
I guess my only follow-up is, you note that the president has a tendency to exaggerate. And I would agree with you. I think folks at home, the question they might ask is, and why is that a problem? Because if a lot of people are making this out to be that, oh, well, this is just how the president does business. But I think you've hit a nail on the head here. Why is his exaggeration an issue, particularly when it comes to intelligence, military strikes, actions that the United States has taken?
Well, first, he didn't go to Congress for any kind of authorization. And so he did this unilaterally. He overstepped his bounds. But remember, when we talk about a president lying about something or exaggerating, this is not a matter of crowd size at an inauguration. This is a matter of war and potentially risking, or not potentially, actually risking American service members' lives in that war, and risking getting us more deeply involved as well. Over the past week, and especially over the weekend, as all this was taking place, I had so many people in San Antonio, Texas, where I represent, that's known as Military City, USA, who reached out to me and said, we don't want to get involved in another long and messy and very expensive war in the Middle East. And so they saw us going down that same road that we went down with Iraq, where, based on biased or bad intelligence, a president makes a decision and essentially makes a mistake that could cost thousands of lives of American service members.
Congressman, you had the president complaining about both Israel and Iran, saying they don't know what the F they're doing. Is that a policy shift or a mood shift on the part of the president?
I mean, I think that he's upset that this is me trying to piece together what happened, but I think that he was trying to cajole them into a ceasefire, and they didn't do that immediately. And he doesn't like it that people don't listen to him right away. And so he got upset on the White House lawn. But based on everything I'm seeing, I'm telling you, I would be surprised if this ceasefire holds. And I want to be clear, I hope that it does. I hope that it holds. I don't want Iran to develop a nuclear weapon. But I believe that the best way to do that, and the proven way to do that, is by coming to some kind of agreement with them that restricts their nuclear arms program. Otherwise, I do think that we're going to be in this situation again.
But Congressman, let's break this down a little bit more. There is a reason why Iran has been, in my estimation, a little bit cavalier about all of this, in the sense that there's not been this heightened kind of reaction. A sort of a tepid response. Okay, we're going to give you a heads up. We're going to drop a few bombs on a couple of bases and call it a night. Because they know what damage was and was not done to their facilities. They know that what Donald Trump did only took them out of the game for about 3 to 6 months at worst. So when you see and hear individuals like Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt, screeding against CNN and MSNBC and others who are reporting on this assessment.
I think the big question right now is whether, it's very obvious that this was a successful strike in that they hit the targets. The military, there's no question that they hit the targets that they were going after. But the big question is, did it actually set the program back? And that is what we're still trying to get an assessment on. This fabulous reporting out of the New York Times, Nicole.
So this reporting, Michael Crowley, I'm going to ask you to speak to this. I want to read the bylines on the story. It's Julian Barnes, who covers Intel, Helene Cooper, who is Courtney's colleague, covers the Pentagon, Eric Schmidt, who also covers the Pentagon, Ronan Bergman, who I think is still based in Israel, Maggie Haberman, and Jonathan Swan, who cover the White House. A 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 byline story that says this. A preliminary classified U.S. report says the American bombing of Iran's nuclear sites sealed off the entrances to 2 of the facilities, but did not collapse their underground buildings. The early findings conclude that the strikes over the weekend set back Iran's nuclear program by only a few months. Before the attack, U.S. intelligence agencies had said that if Iran tried to rush the making of a bomb, it would take about 3 months. After the U.S. bombing run and days of attacks by the Israeli Air Force, the report by the Defense Intelligence Agency estimated that the program was delayed less than 6 months. What can you tell us about what this means in terms of, again, a military operation that was, in terms of hitting its target, successful, but a foreign policy which admittedly hasn't been super clearly communicated to the American people? But if the message that Donald Trump delivered Saturday night was that we obliterated Iran's nuclear program, it's clear that this reporting seems to call that into question.
Absolutely, Nicole. I mean, it's a very devastating report. Assuming it's accurate, it's an initial assessment. We should caveat it. And U.S. intelligence officials are still trying to collect information. But the first assessment here runs very much against the president's initial report and assessment to the American people, which, was always sort of an improbably quick conclusion for the president to draw. It takes time after an attack like that to figure out what has happened. And so it never really made sense that the president had that degree of certitude so quickly. And even by Sunday morning, other U.S. officials were not using the same kind of language that he is, but that he was in that initial response. But look, this was a high-risk operation. Not only in the sense of the military risk, which fortunately, no U.S. personnel were harmed or even challenged, it appears, but in terms of the long-term consequences and Iran's reaction, which the full dimensions of which we still don't know, even if there is this fragile ceasefire in place. And there's also the strong possibility that Iran will regroup and try to accelerate and crash to build a nuclear weapon very quickly as a result of this attack. So it was a high-risk attack. And the president initially sold it as having an extremely high reward. But this report now suggests that the skeptics who said that we have incredible military capabilities, but it's just very, very hard to completely take out these underground targets. And you have to be careful about doing that because there's going to be a cost. Those skeptics are looking a lot smarter right now as a result of this initial intelligence assessment.
Ned, I'm going to do two things. I want to read a little bit more from the story, and then I want to show you what the chairman of Joint Chiefs, Dan Kane, said the morning after Trump described the mission as, quote, obliterating Iran's nuclear capabilities. The Times makes this point, quote, the findings suggest that President Trump's statements that Iran's nuclear facilities were obliterated was overstated, at least based on the initial damage assessment. Congress had been set to be briefed on the strike on Tuesday, and lawmakers were expected to ask about the findings of this assessment, but the session was postponed. Senators are now set to be briefed Thursday. The report also said that much of Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium was moved before the strikes, which destroyed little of the nuclear material. Some of that may have been moved to secret nuclear sites maintained by Iran. And then let me show you what General Kane said.
And to the chairman, you said the battle damage assessment is still ongoing, but do you believe that some nuclear capability in Iran remains?
Thanks for your question. I think BDA is still pending, and it would be way too early for me to comment on what may or may not still be there. But thanks for the...
What you have here is Iran retaliating by humiliating. Retaliation by humiliation. I bet you can make a really catchy song with that rhyme there. But it's like they've made it clear that not only has Trump's plan failed, he's been humiliated by Israel and all of that, and the United States is now divided on this issue, rightfully so, because a majority of Americans know this is ridiculous. So the Iranians already know that 56, at least in that one poll we saw, 56% of people don't support this. And in another poll, it was very partisan, obviously, because MAGA is a cult. All 80-some% of Republicans support the bombing. 80% of Democrats don't. But 2/3 of independents are with the I hate bombing side, meaning that there's a clear majority of people, again, in that poll as well, against the bombing. So the Iranians can say, look, we've already won this to a degree. Our retaliation a few nights later is that your country opposes this. Our country is mad we're being bombed. I bet if you polled Iranians saying, do you enjoy having your family killed by Trump and Israel? I know, do you enjoy having your country bombed? And I'm guessing a majority would say no. Americans are not united. And it turns out that Trump didn't, at least according to some sources, they may not even have accomplished the mission. Remember how I said, guys, remember, I don't want to toot my own horn, but I'm going to let you guys, because you guys are saying the same thing, toot the horns in the comments. I literally want you guys to write, like, toot, toot, toot. You said, this is going to be his Bush mission accomplished moment. Many of us that are old enough to remember, even if you're a little bit younger than me, I was, in high school when all this was going on. We said, oh, Bush put up the mission accomplished banner, and those wars were still going on 20 years later. And so Trump put up the mission accomplished banner, and just days later, the mission's already failed.